I think that I've been very blessed with a very unusual life as a child. My family was very poor and traveled like poor people do, always looking for that rainbow before you could get the pot of gold. So that we always lived in very precarious situations and always met a lot of very interesting people. David comes from a more conventional background, a more upper middle class background, but he also traveled when he was a kid and went to places that he was not under control of his parents and had interesting adventures and experiences. And when we came together, I think that we both already had a treasure trove of characters and incidents and things that we could rely on as our treasure box for stories later on, if that makes sense to anyone. I think that people have to get out into the world and meet a lot of different people. I think that that's the key to storytelling. And the interesting thing to me is the poorer the people are, the more they rely on stories. So that if you have the opportunity to be with poorer people, they're going to tell you stories, great stories. Now I get most of my stories from other writers. We had a writer dinner last night where everyone's telling stories, but mostly they're telling stories about their family, their kids. Although one of the gals told me the story of her grandparents who had settled in California in the 1800s, and it's like, I'm going to use one of the things she told me. We collect everything as storytellers. David and I had the experience of going to visit the Queen Mary that's docked down in San Pedro outside of Long Beach. And we went with two other writers who were very successful writers. It was just a day trip. And we got on this boat and we sat down at this table, and one of them would say, hey, you know, this reminds me, oh, I can't say, I better not say it. And the other writer said, no, go ahead. No, because this oh no, I'm working on that one. It's like writers are very guarded about what they share with other writers. Stories are what hold us together, and everyone has an Aunt Blanche who did eccentric things, or I used, in the very first script that I wrote, I used the story that I thought at the time came from my own background, but maybe somebody else had told the story of the old, it was a couple actually, that the man and the woman were quite elderly, and they got up in the morning and they got all dressed. And they went out and they went to funerals. And they would go to funerals every day, and they no longer had any family in this country. And they had no kids. They didn't really have neighbors that had any use to them. And they would go to these funerals and then go to the receptions afterwards. And then they'd come home and they'd talk about it. Well, I got that into my first script in a very, very oblique way. But it's like, and then it was like, good, I've saved that somehow. But a lot of that comes from the saving of stories, I think, comes somewhat, not just from my background, but from the documentary part of my history. David and I worked on several documentaries in which what we were doing was saving the stories of people who were getting older. The Day After Trinity was saving the stories of the scientists who had worked on the Manhattan Project because they were getting older, and there was this need to get their stories down on film and tape.